Okay, so let's continue. So the crops are normally the self-pollinated crops. We can say that whatever the millet, mung bean or lentil, cowpea, chickpea, barley, so the wheat, rice, sesame, tomato, these are all the crops which we classify as a self-pollinated crops. So for that, we are going to see some of the breeding methods which we already discussed in detail. We'll see in that maybe another 20 minutes we will continue. So here, when you look on that, every generation of selfing, I told you every time when you self-feed, you lose the heterozygosity. So when you lose the heterozygosity means, for example, F1 is heterozygote. Then when you do first selfing, you will get 20% of the homozygous, another 20% will be parent 1 type, parent 2 type, 50% will be heterozygote. So the first generation we get 50% attain homozygosity. Then second generation will get 75% homozygosity. That means every time we are losing the heterozygote continuously, but we are getting homozygosity will try to increase. So whenever see F1 is 50-50, then we go for every selfing generation will get increase the homozygosity of 75, 87.5, 93, 98 like that. 5 to 6 generation of selfing, we get increase the amount of homozygosity, and also we lose the heterozygous allele continuously every generation of selfing, and we gain the homozygosity in every generation. So whenever you make your crosses, whenever you get a selfing continuously, this is the fact. You can see any generations, selfing generation, when you go and see the field, the number of individuals after selfing, the number of individual getting homozygosity is getting increased slowly after 6th generation. That's why 6th generation of selfing will get a homozygous line in case of rice that can be used for the further testing in the field. So the variation in the is maybe due to the environment or sometimes heredity. So you are getting variants and you are continuously selfing and you are getting attaining homozygosity. After attaining homozygosity, you get some new individuals which have incorporated both the parental character. So when you choose that, so when you choose this one, you can get a lot of variability that you have to decide whether it is variation may be due to environment or really heritable nature. And also the heritable variation was originated either by recombination or in the variation in the recombination, sometimes in the mutation if you use other methods. Okay, so this is a very famous experiment by Johansen experiment where he did on the mixed lot of beans. He selected the bean lot. In that he shorted out the plants seeds based on the size he separated. So Johansen's pure line selection, he only proposed this theory. How he did the mixture of lots in the bean, it is a self-pollinated crops. But when you see the mixture lot, you can see a lot of variation in the seed size. So what he did, he selected the seed size. So he selected the seeds, pure line number 19, another pure line, for example, pure line number 1, he taken the seeds weight from 0.6 gram, 631 gram to 0.6649 grams. He chosen the seeds which are a little bit bigger size separately and smaller size seeds separately, and then he arranged it, and he selfed the seeds again one more generation. Then whatever the seeds he is getting in the smaller seed group, which have lesser seed weight, and also the bigger seed group in a higher seed weight. So this shows that whenever a mixed population, if you segregate it to a smaller and bigger one, or low weight and high weight, then if you one more generation, if you grow all these seeds which you are selected by pure line selections, you can able to separate it. Some of the varieties are smaller seeded, some of the varieties are bigger seeded. By that you can separate it. This is the variation in the beans which pure line is because of genetically controlled some of the seed you can able to select and fix it. So this experiment demonstrates that the mixed population the self-pollinated crops, we can able to produce a pure line which are entirely different, smaller seeder and big seeded one. This is the Johansen experiment shows that how the pure line selection, we can able to separate two different lot of smaller seeded and bigger seeded separately. If you separate it and if you grow for 2 or 3 generation, you will always get a smaller seeded type. And bigger seeded type, if you separate, if we do 1 or 2 selfing and we can maintain and a big seed type, then you can easily make here 2 pure lines, pure line number 1 and 19, 2 different lines derived from the same mixed lot of bean. Okay, so this Johansen result shows selected large and small seeds from a genetically mixed lot of bean and measured weight of each seed and compared the average weight its progeny. So the progeny weight is compared with the original. The variation in the weight of the individuals are homozygous self lines are due to, some of them are due to environment. Variation between line is due to the genetics. So when you see that the small variation between these individuals are due to the environmental variation, but the variation between this lot and this lot, pure line 1 and 9, which may be due to genetics. This is the way the Johansen experiment proved that. Okay, so we know that the variation is measure of variation in the plant. Whenever you select a variety or thing, we have to differentiate the variation is from genotype or because of environment. So the phenotype of any plant, when you observe a plant, which a variety, if you look 451 variety rice, if you grow in a particular field, you look on the variety. The same variety, if you grow in another location, sometimes because of poor fertility or some of the other environment factor, it may be a little bit shorter, or sometimes excess nitrogen, it may be a taller. So in order to analyze the variation really due to the environment or due to the genetics, so you have to, first of all, you have to measure the variation. How you are measuring the variation? So that any phenotype of individual plant is divided into, one is on genotype, another is environment. So the genotypic effect and also the environmental effect and genotype into the environmental effect. So how we can do that? You already studied in the statistics. If any experiment, if you do replicated experiment, replication 1 or replication 2 or replication 3, for example, if you're raising 5 variety in 3 replication, so that particular variety, replication 1 or replication 2, there is a variation in the between replication 1 and 2, then we can say that this is due to the environment variation. So this can be separated between how much of contribution of variation between replication is due to environment, how much of variation is really due to the genetics. So that can be done by using some kind of minimum statistical experiment like RBD, randomly block design. So or CRD, like that we have statistical design. So what I mean to say here is any phenotype which you are observed in any plant, it is by genotype and environment and G-T interaction. All 3 contribute for any phenotype you are observing. So this is the maximum, it's giving the genotype effect. Some amount of environmental effect will be there, some kind of interaction effect also there. So whenever you phenotype, you have to dissect out, then only real genotype effect you can see. The genetic effect can be further divided into, this genetics is due to, so this genetics is due to genetic effect again. The environmental effect you can quantify by replication, the variations you can easily quantify the error due to replication, due to genotype or genotype interactions. When you separate it a genotype effect, again the genotype effect is due to what? It's say to additive variance or dominant variance or epistatic. So 3 kind of variance. The additive gene action or dominant gene action or epistatic gene action. So 3 kind of gene action again you can estimate from the genotypes. So the genotypic effect can be divided into additive, dominance and epistatic. So G is A plus D plus I. Okay. So the variation is variation in the population that is genetically uniform. It's a highly inbred lines or F1s. In a population, this is in the individual variety. When you look in a population, when the population again, it is due to genetic, environment, G-T interaction and error. So this can be easily estimated, even the individual varieties and also in the population. So the population also, when you select in a population also, when you look on the variation, if a number of plants are grown as a population, F2 population or the recombinant imperilline population, when they grow in the field, you find this population also you have to dissect out the effect either due to genotype, environment or GNTE or error variance and how much the phenotype is contributed by GE and GNTE. Then only you can easily dissect out many other variants. So coming to the gene action, this again the important component, the genetics of any trait if you want to see in the conventional method. They have two kind of, either it may be additive gene action or it may be a dominant gene action or epistatic gene action. How you are estimating the additive gene effect? The additive effect of each allele can be summed. For example, if you have capital BB, small bb and capital BB, it's homozygous other parent, heterozygote. If you see the additive effect, this particular allele, this one parent is another parent in the heterozygote. Additive effect is it's because of combination of all the small gene will contribute for the additive effect. If it is a dominant effect, means either one of the allele which can able to give this kind of effect, then we call it as dominance. For example, it's a one parent which having the dominant allele. So the heterozygotes we have only the maximum of 4 plus 4. The dominant effect will be high. So the one functional allele can provide complete locus function. For this locus function, this allele one allele can itself able to provide plus 4 effect. Similarly, the BB, if we take the heterozygous condition also, we have the same effect. But in the homozygous recessive state, we have less effect. So one allele, either capital B or capital BB or capital B small b will give the same effect. This is called dominant gene effects. But in this case, you have to, both the alleles are needed to produce the additive effects. All the component is needed. When you talk about the epistatic, the functional allele is needed in both the loci. Here, epistatic interaction also, either this capital B may be epistatic to small b or small b may be epistatic to capital B. So when these both are there, either capital B or small b or capital B or capital B, we can have desirable gene effect. So that is a functional allele needed for each locus. So each functional allele, this allele, capital B allele, small b allele. Either one, both alleles are needed for giving the epistatic effect. So in over dominance, this is the heterozygous locus better than homozygous. Always the heterozygote always have better effect than the homozygous. This homozygous 2 plus 1, but heterozygous have plus 3 effect. Similarly, it's have plus 3 effect, but it's have plus 4. Always heterozygous have higher effect than the homozygous capital AA or small AA parent. So this having heterozygous always have the higher effect. So this way, normally any gene action in the conventional method of breeding in the any self-pollinated crops or the cross-pollinated, they classify the gene action into additive, dominance, and epistatic. Whenever you gather additive effect, dominance effect, so when your trait is controlled by additive effect, what kind of strategy you have to plan? If it is controlled by dominant effect, what kind of strategy you have to do? If it is epistatic, you have to plan accordingly the strategy. So the additive versus dominant genetic variance is due to the effect of each individual allele being put together without any interaction on other allele. This is additive variance I already described in the previous slide, and also this dominant variance, how it is working, and also the dominant variance is not directly inherited from the parents to offspring because it's an interaction between two allele in the dominant case. So whenever you have F1 hybrids, it's have more effect. If you go for dominant type of action, you can always rely on F1 hybrids. But additive variance, you can go for later generation selection, and you can able to get positive improvement on the types. Okay, one more terminology you should learn. Maybe another 5 to 10 minutes I will finish this discussion. These are all some of the terminologies which commonly being used, and whenever if you go for any crop improvement program, the conventional breeding, when you add to the molecular breeding, the basic terminology on conventional breeding is that you should know. Then only, even if you are introducing any trait into the new variety, what is the nature of gene action happening in other traits when you introduce a new trait, whether this can have additive effect or some dominant effect or sometimes epistatic. So this will change your whenever introduced in a new background, it can always have some kind of effect. So we have to be very careful on when you introduce a trait, you have to look on the background, what is going on in that. So the heritability is the one which also be very important when you, any trait when you are going to introduce. The heritability is the degree in which the values observed in the parents are passed to the progeny. We always tell that these traits are heritable. Some of the traits inherited from my parents. These are the traits which I get from mom. These are the traits which I am getting from father. So we always tell these are the heritable traits. How you know this is the heritable? We always say this, that means that character which passed from your parents to the offspring, it is heritable. Some characters are highly heritable. Some character you can, as it is, you get, so you can directly heritable. Some characters are, it's not heritable, so it has a lot of effect on that. So that's why the heritability estimate is very important in order to know whether the trait is heritable or not. It is based on the phenotypic values, and also it describes the ratio of genetic variance to the total variance. In the progenies, when you observe some kind of variance which apart from their parental thing, how much in the total variance, how much the genetic component is contributing. That is very important. So heritability is equal to variance due to genotype divided by variance due to phenotypes. So among the total phenotypic variance, how much your genetic variance is contributed, that we call it as broad sense heritability. So the broad sense heritability is the ratio of total genetic variance to the total phenotypic variance. Another terminology is narrow sense heritability. That means it's the ratio of the additive genetic variance to the total phenotypic variance. Of the total phenotypic variance, how much of additive gene action is there, additive variance is there, then this is called narrow sense heritability. Okay. So how to estimate the broad sense heritability and how to estimate narrow sense heritability. If you, for example, if you want to estimate the broad sense heritability, then two pure lines are crossed and produce F1 followed by F2, and always we make a process, any develop new varieties. So all the generation you have to analyze F1, F2, parent 1, parent 2, all together grow in the same environment. Then you have to measure the variations. So the broad sense heritability, variation in the F2 minus environment divided by variation in the F2. So what environment variation is showing? Variation in F1 plus variation in the P1 plus variation in the P2 divided by 3. So that is environment variance. So variance to F2 minus environment divided by F2, you will get the broad sense heritability. Same way, if you want to go for narrow sense heritability, it considers only additive effects only. So whatever the additive, exactly the individual contribute to the progenies, so that will have the narrow sense heritability. We also already discussed. Okay, so the narrow sense heritability, when you select the any population, normally if it's a random mating population, you have bell-shaped curve. If it is a dominant variance, it cannot be easily predictive. I told you, it is only expressed in the heterozygous condition, both allele in the heterozygous condition. It always expresses the dominant variance you can predict. But in the case of progeny selections, the pure line selection method, always you rely on narrow sense heritability. That means in a population, you select the best individuals which you produce the next generation, or for the improvement program, we select some of the individuals which have additive gene action, which have it's selected. When it forward to the next generation, the distribution of the generation 2, the distribution of this, we selected towards particular additive component and graph shifted towards one side. So we always, the selection pressure, if you apply in a certain individuals, then when you forward to the next generation, the mean also shifted to towards the individuals. So the narrow sense heritability, variance of additive divided by total variance, this is the measure of heritability in case of narrow sense heritability. Okay, so I don't want to put so much of terminology. So with that, we'll move to the next portion. The heritability in the selection experiment, anyhow, the next generation mean minus original mean divided by total parental mean by original mean. This will help you about the heritability in a selection experiment. This is a simple term. If you remember, this is enough. Okay, so the genetic advance in one generation of selection, when you get a phenotype variance and the heritability, and I is the average of selected individuals in the standard deviation. When you look on the estimate of genetic advance estimate, always when you select the parental population as small portions, then when you go to the next generation, the progeny, most of them, if it's highly heritable, most of the progenies can able to give you a particular type of selected plants. Always the population looks like same type of population. So this is why the narrow sense heritability will always work. So the breeding of self-pollinated crops, the objective of selection is increase the frequency of superior allele. Which kind of allele we need? We always select the superior allele in the genetically variant population, and also purify the mixed population and different phenotypes and develop the new cultivar. This is based on the extent of heritability on the trait of interest. So I already told you in the self-pollinated crops breeding, they select from superior recombinants or they go for the land races. They apply mass selection or pure line selection. By that they develop elite varieties. When you do crossing, they do bulk selection or single seed selection or pedigree selection. By that they develop the elite varieties. So this is what the people select in a self-pollinated crops breeding program. Okay, just few seconds on every method, then you can read the method later in detail in your textbooks. Creation of genetic variants, normally make a crosses and develop F1. Then these F1 plants, around 500 F1 plants if you select it. And from that you grow F2. We grow for 3,000, 4,000 F2 individuals. From that we select a positive plants which you are looking for specific trait like yield or disease resistance. Similarly, there are two. This is whenever you selection pressure you apply, we go for either bulk selection or go for pedigree selection. So one method is pedigree selection, another is bulk method of selection. Pedigree selection means after crossing F1, F2 individual plants you have to choose individual dots. Then you have to raise as a progeny row. Individual plants are selected and raised as a progeny row. So in the progeny, F3 progenies, you select only the positive plants or the plant which you are looking for, either disease resistant or yield, whatever the trait which you are looking, you select those plants. From that you again raise a progeny. And again this next generation, again you select only the plant and again raise the progeny. So every time we go for progeny rows, and again we know that which is the pedigree, from where this particular plant come, from where this come, like that we have the pedigree also with us. And then finally, after when you reach the F6 generation, the progenies will attain the homozygosity. Whichever the plant you selected from this, and if you raised in a progeny, it looks like uniform. So only this case, you have to reject the unwanted progeny, only select the positive progeny. Then you can go for experimental testing, large scale field testing, or we can do that. But in case of bulk method of breeding, always you select some bulks and then raise next generation, select some bulk seed, raise it. After the 4 or 5 generation, then you go for individual progeny wise and select the best progeny, then go for field testing. This is the major method, is a pedigree selection and the bulk selection. If you go to any standard genetics books, either plant breeding books like BD Singh, you can see that how the pedigree method of breeding or bulk method of breeding been explained in a detailed way. But you should understand this way. You look for a pedigrees. Whenever you selected best progeny, then if you go back the record, then you can find out from which plant you selected. So this shows the pedigree method of selection, but bulk method you cannot trace the pedigree, only the progenies you can get. And also the bulk selection or the mass selections, you select as a bulk and select the individuals and best families are advanced, and this way the bulk method of selection is doing. In the pedigree method of selection, every generation, for example, F2, you are growing large number of plants, more than 2,000 to 3,000 plants. And from F3 to F5 generation, each generation we go for progeny row. We select 3 to 5 best plant. We are not selecting all the plants. We select 3 to 5 best plant. Then this been raised as a progeny row. So every generation we raise for 25 to 50 families are retained, and at the end of the F5 generation, and then you identify the plants which shows maintaining the superior traits of the plant you recorded. And also when the pedigree method of breeding, after F6 generation, the families of one plant row selected have a lot of designated experimental line. After that, it will not segregate further. So those line you fix that is given the line number. From that, this adapter line goes for preliminary trial, and then after that preliminary yield trial, it goes to the multi-location trial. You check the different environment, how it performing. Then you check with the existing variety if it is superior. Then after F11 or F12 generation, they distribute the new cultivars varieties. So another one more thing, a single seed descent method, we call it as. From this again, after crossing, you get a F2 to F5 generation. You select always single plant. From each single plant, you go for rows, and each rows you select the single plant, then go for next generation like that. Every generation you will select randomly one plant. From that plant you go for progeny row. From this progeny row only one single plant, then go for progeny row. After that you get stabilized progenies. This we call it as single seed descent method. Finally, the backcross method. This is, we are going to discuss on the cross-pollinator crops also. When you make a crosses between two lines and you get F1, the F1 again continuously backcrossed with the recurrent parent, the cultivar which you want to have the recovery more recurrent parent. Every time BC1, BC2, BC3, BC4, every time you backcross with the recurrent parent, and you will get finally end of the BC4, you will get most of the parental genome recovered. Then do one more selfing, and you can isolate the lines, homozygous lines. From this will be used as varieties or yield trials. So the backcross method is commonly used method for transferring a single trait of interest from a donor. Always use one donor one time. After that, every backcross use the recurrent parent. By that, you transfer a trait of interest, keep the every recurrent parent. Every time backcrossing will get the recurrent parent genome recovery quickly. So every backcross generation, you gain the recurrent parent genome 75, 85, 96% recurrent parent genome. You recover it, and you will get a maximum recurrent parent genome. And finally, the one more thing is doubled haploid line. This is you already studied in your tissue culture course also. When you make a crosses, when you get a F1, the F1s are doubled. So F1s anthers being used for, in case of rice anther culture, you put it in the medium and get a anther callus will be come, then you can regenerate the plant. During the regeneration process, you get a doubling the chromosome number occurs. Then this we call it a DH line. This is in order to attain the homozygosity, very quicker method. Normally the double haploids being produced in case of rice. Now maize, although DH lines are available. So far we discussed what are the breeding methods, starting from pedigree method, mass selection, bulk method, and every methods which are mostly followed in case of self-pollinated crops. So those are the things we discussed this class. So with that, I conclude that how the self-pollinated crops is different kind of breeding methods are applied in order to improve the variety or develop a new variety. These are the commonly method. Still people are using the conventional breeding method. Okay. So thank you for listening, and I hope we will continue the next class on the cross-pollinated crops.